The blade was already at my throat when I heard my mother's voice for the first time in 11 years. I did not flinch. I had learned, on a small blue planet far from this palace, that flinching gets you killed. Standing still, calm, unreadable, that is what keeps you alive. My name is Saren Vale Korath. Once I was the heiress to the Korathi Empire, the largest star nation in this part of the galaxy. Now I was standing in the same throne room where my mother, the Empress, had stripped me of my name and my crown, and sent me away to die on a world she called a backwater full of savages. She was wrong. That backwater world saved my life, and now it had sent 3 warriors back with me to remind her of that mistake. 11 years ago, I was accused of a crime I did not commit. A bomb went off in the northern sector, and the blame was placed on me before the smoke even cleared. I never got a trial. My mother simply looked at me across this same golden floor and said one sentence that I still hear in my sleep. "You are no longer my daughter. You are exiled to Earth." She meant it as a death sentence. Earth was supposed to be a graveyard for people the Empire wanted gone quietly. No court would ask questions about a criminal shipped off to a planet full of primitives. But when my ship crashed into a wheat field outside a small town called Millbrook, the first thing that happened was not violence. A farmer named Dale Harmon pulled me out of the wreckage before it caught fire. He did not know what I was. He did not care. He just saw someone hurt and pulled me free. I lived with his family for 3 years before I understood what humans actually were. They were not savages. They were fast. They decided things in seconds that my own people would debate for a decade. They loved without hesitation, and they fought without hesitation, and somehow those 2 things came from the exact same place inside them. I married a woman named Kira Bellamy, a doctor from that same small town, and together we raised 3 children who grew up knowing 2 worlds at once. My oldest, Toma, has my eyes and Kira's stubbornness, which turned out to be a very dangerous combination. My daughter Priya has a gift for reading a room in half a second, the same way her mother could read a diagnosis, just by watching someone walk into a clinic. And my youngest, Eli, can take apart a jammed engine and rebuild it into something better before breakfast. For 11 years, none of them knew they were heirs to anything. They only knew they were loved. Then, 6 weeks ago, a ship landed in that same wheat field, and a Korathi envoy stepped out looking like he had aged 20 years since I last saw him. His name was Doran, and he used to be my personal guard before my exile. He fell to one knee in the dirt of a human farm and told me the Empire was dying. My mother was ill. A noble house named Dreven had spent a decade quietly buying loyalty across the court, and now they were only weeks away from seizing the throne the moment the Empress closed her eyes for the last time. He begged me to come back, not because he loved me, but because he was terrified of what House Dreven would do once they held real power. I told him no. I had a home. I had a family. I did not owe that palace anything. Then Toma walked into the room, heard everything, and asked a question that changed my mind. If people are about to get hurt, and we can stop it, why would we not go? That is the question a Korathi noble would never ask, because a Korathi noble is taught from birth to calculate risk before calculating right and wrong. My son asked it the way you ask what time it is. Simple, obvious, human. So we went. The court was not prepared for what walked through those doors. They expected a broken exile crawling back to beg forgiveness. Instead, they got 4 people who did not bow, did not flinch, and did not wait to be given permission to speak. Doran had warned me that House Dreven controlled most of the guards inside the throne room, and he was right. I felt it the moment we stepped inside, that particular silence that happens right before something goes wrong. The first attack came from a guard near the eastern pillar, a poisoned blade meant for my mother's throat, while everyone's attention was on us. Korathi guards are trained to react in half a second. My son Eli reacted in a tenth of that, because on Earth he grew up catching falling tools before they hit the ground. An instinct built from nothing more dramatic than helping his human grandfather in a workshop every summer. He caught the guard's wrist before the blade ever moved an inch, twisted it away, and simply held on until real guards arrived. The room went completely silent. House Dreven's leader, a cold and calculating noble named Vesa Dreven, stepped forward, and demanded to know how a half-human child had reflexes faster than a trained Karathi soldier. My daughter Priya answered before I could. Because we were never taught to wait for permission to protect someone we love. It was such a simple sentence, but in a court built entirely on protocol and hierarchy and endless waiting for approval, it landed like a thunderclap. Vesa tried to regain control of the room by accusing me of bringing dangerous, unpredictable creatures into the palace. She said humans were exactly the kind of chaos the Empire had spent centuries trying to breed out of its bloodlines. That is when Toma spoke, and his voice did not shake at all. You call it chaos. On Earth we call it courage, and courage is the only thing that was standing between your assassin and the Empress 5 seconds ago. Where was your calculated, careful Karathi discipline then? Nobody in that room had an answer. My mother, who had been carried into the throne room on a chair because she was too weak to stand, lifted her hand and asked to see my children up close. I helped her stand, and for the first time in 11 years, she looked at me not as a disgraced heiress, but as her daughter. She studied Eli's steady hands, still faintly shaking with adrenaline but not fear. She studied Priya's sharp, unafraid eyes. She studied Toma, who stood exactly like I used to stand before the exile, except without any of the fear I always carried underneath it. Then she said something I never expected to hear from her in my entire life. I was wrong about that planet. I sent you there to disappear. Instead, you built something the Empire has been missing for 1,000 years. House Dreven did not go quietly. Vesa tried one final move, ordering the remaining loyal guards to seal the doors and finish what the assassin had started. But the guards hesitated, because they had just watched 3 so-called half-breed children do what an entire elite unit had failed to do, and hesitation was all we needed. Doran and the palace guard who remained loyal moved fast, and within minutes Vesa Dreven and her closest allies were in custody, their decade of quiet plotting undone in a single afternoon, because they never accounted for the one thing they could not calculate: us. My mother offered me the throne back that same night. She said the bloodline needed to continue, and I was still, by law, the rightful heir. I told her no, the same way Toma once told Doran yes, without hesitation and without needing to calculate the political cost first. I am not the heiress this empire remembers anymore, I told her, but my children are something new. Let them decide what this empire becomes, with human hearts and Karathi minds, instead of forcing them to choose one over the other. My mother is still recovering, slowly, and the court is still adjusting to the idea that the future of the Karathi Empire might be shaped by 3 young people who grew up fixing tractors, reading people, and running headfirst toward danger instead of away from it. Some nobles still call my children savages behind closed doors, but every single one of them remembers exactly who was standing closest to the Empress when the blade came out, and it was not any of them. It was a boy who grew up on a wheat farm in Millbrook, who never once stopped to calculate the odds before doing the right thing. And somewhere out there, on a small blue planet the Empire once used as a graveyard, that same boy's grandfather is probably still checking the weather and wondering when his grandchildren are coming home for dinner.